Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a snack.
So I'm watching Screen Junkies, and one of the questions they have is who would play Robin in the new DC universe?
Okay.
And the people are throwing out, Ellen Page, the guy who played Beast, and other people, and they start explaining their reasons for it and why they think that would play a good Robin in a prequel kind of story or in a sequel, where Robin's still alive, and so on and so forth. Everything's based on that one scene in the teaser trailer for Batman v Superman where you see the Robin outfit covered in ha ha ha. So I'm sitting and listening to their pitches, and I'm getting really bored. They're fine choices if you're sticking with a traditional understanding of the Batman-Robin relationship. Then suddenly it dawned on me, and I have a suggestion for a Robin that would be very different to any other Robin.
And what would that be?
Jared Leto.
But he's doing the Joker.
Exactly.
I see where you're going with this. So Jared Leto, who's playing the Joker in Suicide Squad, was at one point Robin and then driven completely insane and took on the persona of the Joker. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Which also gives, precedent for the, him defacing the costume and everything like that as a big joke to. Oh, that's genius.
Isn't that cool? I thought of that. I thought of that listening to them. They're arguing back and forth about who plays the sidekick character. I'm like, the movies that had the sidekick character suck, and the reason why Nolan avoided bringing in Robin because they didn't want the sidekick character, and then you don't want to do it with the new movies either because no one likes Robin. So
Fair.
I thought, what would be a cool way to have Robin in it, sort of, and make it a twisted relationship between Joker and Batman in a way that wasn't done before. And it would be even better if Batman's the one who drove him insane.
Oh, that would be great. That's almost as good as Bruce getting shot and his dad becoming Batman and his mom becoming the Joker.
That's messed up.
That is messed up.
It would be even cooler is after we had this conversation that ends up actually being what it is they're going with.
I would totally be on board for that. I would watch it just on the precipice alone that they would actually stoop to that. To be honest, until this conversation, now I'm thinking it would be really cool to have Robin actually become the Joker.
It's one of those things that Hollywood likes to do, which is ultra twist everybody together, so everybody, you have a small cast of characters and you have everybody kind of all knowing each other and all related to each other, so they're all, one causes the other's misfortunes and so on and so forth without introducing new people.
How would you do that though? Was it Batman that drove him insane? Was it the pressures of being the crime fighter that drove him insane? Was it a villain or say another Joker perhaps?
Do you know what's fun too? Not revealing that. It would be better if they just kind of teased little bits of information throughout the Ben Affleck Batman trilogy and the whatever other things, just little hints here and there of how did the Joker become the Joker. Because in the last Joker incarnation, they didn't tell you an origin story. In fact, the guy openly lied about his origin story and said many things.
Twice.
Yeah, so in some ways it doesn't matter where the Joker came from. Is that this guy's here now and
he's insane.
And he's insane and he's going to kill people. But in this particular case, what DC is going with at least with what I saw from the Suicide Squad trailer and from other things, that I think audiences are really tired of origin stories. This is the fabled story of how the guy became super by extraordinary measures. I would love Doctor Strange to just be Doctor Strange, and they just allude to the fact that maybe once upon a time he was a surgeon and something happened, but without the origin nonsense. Spider-Man, no origin story, done. They've done that twice. I don't need to know. There's
enough superhero movies out there, and obviously with superheroes being the biggest cash grab in Hollywood, everybody who is everybody should know these by now.
The the other thing is, it's not about knowing how these people got their powers, is that there's enough superheroes out there to basically say, okay, this guy's a superhero.
Well, I guarantee you that in Batman v Superman, you'll get the obligatory short flashback of Bruce's parents getting shot because it's necessary.
Yes, every single Batman movie does that. Do you know what would be way better for the Deadpool movie? Is if they didn't have any of that how he became Deadpool.
He just shows up and he's Deadpool?
He just shows up and he's Deadpool, because most of the comics, that's what it's all about. He's just Deadpool in the comics. They don't allude to his origin story in every single issue, and they don't build it up, or there's not a connection that he's on a quest because of his origin or so on and so forth.
Yeah, he's just Deadpool.
He's just Deadpool.
I mean, I don't even think he cares that he had an origin story. I think he's just happy doing what he does.
I think Ant-Man is probably the nail in the coffin of origin stories. If you want to make another movie today and follow the 1978 Superman formula, modernized by Sam Raimi doing Spider-Man, and then just regurgitated over and over and over again. That's getting really old and really tired.
Well, even if you needed an origin story, it's a matter of a few minutes exposition within the film itself, and then you can move on from that and have the rest of the movie. Instead of having a good half an hour to 45 minutes of Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man.
Which brings me up on a bit of follow-up. This is a nice segue into follow-up for the first episode. We never talked about in the second episode Big Hero 6, and just kind of quick offshoot. This is exactly my problem with Big Hero 6. The animation was great. I have a lot of positive things to say about the movie. It was overall a great kids movie, and I love Baymax. He was absolutely hilarious, and an excellent construction of a character. But it was 30 minutes of the setup and then an hour of the beginning before the actual movie actually really started. So there was the origin, which is the second hour of the film, and then there's the origin of the origin, the setup, if you will, at the beginning of the movie. And since we're on this topic, that is my only real problem with the film, is that if the movie started about an hour into the movie, it would be a better movie. And
it was definitely designed for kids.
Sure.
In that respect, I mean, it helps kids to understand everything that's going on. But from an adult standpoint, when I go and see a movie, I'm ultimately bored by the transition phase now, because everything is an origin story. It's them holding your hand through the first half of the movie, and it is unnecessary now. And one of the things that I realized while watching Ant-Man is that the origin story is played out.
Yeah, that's why I really love Spider-Man 2 and Matrix Reloaded and superhero sequel films, because they don't tend to go that route. They just kind of throw you in. Like, if you were to pick up Spider-Man comic, any Spider-Man comic, it would adhere something much closer to what is Spider-Man 2 than it is to Spider-Man 1 or 3. First part of a trilogy and the last part of a trilogy, they're trying to kind of make a starting point and make an ending point. Whereas if you're looking at a comic book movie, any issue that you were to pick up at random would be closer to what typically is the second film. So we end up getting just, here is a story of Neo in the Matrix, for example. Here is a story of Spider-Man fighting Dr. Octopus.
Here's Marty and Doc going through time.
Yeah, they don't explain the time machine. They don't explain how Peter Parker got his powers in the second film. That's understood.
On The Matrix Reloaded, we understand the rules of the Matrix.
Yeah, they didn't hold your hand. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people like about the first parts of the film, because they like that drawing you in from our reality into their reality, whereas the second film tends to not do that, which is why it gets poo-pooed a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
People say they didn't understand Matrix Reloaded because it didn't hold your hand the way the first one did.
It wasn't designed to.
I think a lot of sequels do that, but I can think of a superhero origin movie that isn't the typical origin movie. In Thor, he was already Thor at the beginning of the movie.
He's an Asgardian. He's a god.
But what I mean is, it's not the story of Edward Blake finding the hammer and becoming Thor and learning his new power or some garbage like that.
That's what made Thor a good movie, though. It was about a god that fell from grace out of the hive gods and was thrown down to earth and forced to live as a mortal, to learn from his mistakes, to learn that it's not all about power.
Yeah.
I like the different take on that.
Yeah, when it comes to all this wave of DC films that are coming out, I'm not interested in the superhero origin. I think Big Hero 6 and Ant-Man was pretty much the nail in the coffin for me when it comes to that stuff. As far as I'm concerned, you want to tell me about Shazam? Just throw Shazam on the screen at the opening scene. I don't need to know where he came from or how he became who he is. It's at this point in time, it's superheroes are so done to death that you just need to get to the point as quickly as possible.
Well, the other thing too is that if you weave it into the actual film itself, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. I got my powers through mystical means. Okay, cool. Shazam! And there you go. I really am curious on what they're going to do with all the new wave Marvel movies now then. All the standalone ones, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
So, we're on podcast number 3.
We're here already?
Yeah.
I'm excited,
We haven't
actually.
even introduced ourselves. We're just talking.
That was a great introduction. Welcome to MetaFilm List podcast number 3. I'm Corey with Mike.
And we're here to talk about a whole range of random movie trivia and movie conversation.
And it's going to be random. It's going to be very random.
But that makes it half the fun because there's so many films out there and there's so many things to say about so many films that you can't cover them all, and you can't be stuck into one niche of talking about new films or talking about old films. You got to just keep it all mixed up and keep it interesting.
Within 2 weeks of the last one going up, a lot has been seen. Gone through all kinds of things.
I broke a new comfort zone watching Eraserhead.
I need to ask you, how far into your comfort zone did this movie break you?
Well, did you ever see The Cell?
Yes.
Did that movie break your comfort zone?
No.
No, that was perfectly normal. Everything in that movie was just, you see it on a normal rainy day?
I guess it was the way that The Cell was presented. It's her going through the mind of the serial killer, and you get to see how his mind works.
Dude, there was some messed up stuff in that movie.
The transition going into it prepared you that you were going to see stuff that was weird and messed up. I love the scene where he comes down and the cape is hooked in, the curtains are hooked into his shoulders and he's floating down and everything. The horse being dissected. It was just really good visually. I wasn't bothered by it.
Okay. I was bothered by it because there's a lot of things in it that are really weird and surrealist and made to bother the viewer. I think the movie was designed that way, at least partly. I don't think The Cell would have been possible without Eraserhead.
And how is that?
It's based off the same kind of surrealist, weird, and tension-building scenario. In the same way, I felt watching The Cell was kind of like watching Hellraiser, that at any moment something incredibly graphic will happen, even though it didn't necessarily happen in the film. That tension, that anxiety of watching a film is what Eraserhead was trying to accomplish. It was, from the first moment you start watching the movie, it's made to make you feel anxious through the scenes that they're trying to put out, through the long pauses, through all kinds of things, in order to make you feel uncomfortable.
This was David Lynch's first film, wasn't it?
Yeah, he made some short films beforehand, which I think are kind of hard to get a hold of. And then this was his first film that he spent 3 years or 4 years trying to put together. And he released it. It was sort of successful, not really. And then it became kind of this cult hit. And I watched it because there's a whole bunch of David Lynch films on the MetaFilm list that I wanted to get into. And yeah, this one was weird. It was weird, and I would love to hear what you think about it. So maybe in some follow up, you'll let me know.
To tell you the truth, I'm going to watch it after the podcast.
All right. So let us know in the next episode.
I've seen enough David Lynch. I've watched Twin Peaks that I would like to see what he did with his first one.
Did you finish Twin Peaks?
Almost.
Okay.
I've got a little bit of the second season to finish, and we're good.
Well, since we're on Twin Peaks for a brief moment, he's doing 22 more episodes 25 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, that comes out in 2017. So,
as a side note, I just want to say it's very brave of television and production companies to be coming out with the mini-series now. Good on you. I'm happy that they're doing that.
Yeah, so let's see here. Some more follow-up. In the last episode, you mentioned the Equalizer, and I said I hadn't seen it, so I decided to watch it. And yeah, this movie, kind of there's a new wave of films and series out there that are trying to build on this graphic violence. Films that don't need graphic violence get graphic violence, and films that really do need it, like RoboCop, don't have
get
it.
it.
Don't have it. So this was just, it was strange and very, very inaccurate towards the actual original series of it being so graphic.
You've watched an episode of The Equalizer, right?
The TV
Like
show,
the
yeah.
TV show?
Yeah.
How does it compare to the movie then?
So
in violent.
when it comes down to the TV show is about a British-ish American former CIA, maybe MI6 agent who knows way too much about the shady dealings of the government and decides that he has done enough shady things and that he is going to stop doing bad things and start helping people. So he puts an ad in the newspaper and says, I will help you. I will equalize your odds. So in the first episode, there's like 4 different scenarios. One woman's being stalked, another guy is being exploited, and so on and so forth. And they call up this guy. So they're like mini episodes all tied in, kind of in a CSI, because there's different things happening at once.
Okay.
So he's running a few different cases at one time, and he helps these people. And the government isn't really happy with this guy kind of doing his own thing, and they want to get him under control. So I imagine throughout the series there's a little bit of conflict between the government and him as he's trying to help people. Now the film, it is him helping people, but the character himself is very kind of the opposite. He wants to be left alone. He wants to hide the fact that he has all these, skills and abilities, and he's not out there kind of trying to help people until the very end of the film, even though he's doing it throughout the film. And there isn't really this play on the government wondering what happened to him, or that he knows too much, or so on and so forth. It's more of he tries to help this prostitute, and then in the background, the ramifications of that start building towards the end. And throughout the film, he's helping a few other people while you're waiting for the prostitute story to come back and towards the finale. And then it's just about violence. It's about him killing Russian goons in extremely violent ways.
I like the violence.
Is it necessary?
Was it necessary for the film? You could probably have done it without the violence. That's what people want to see.
It's not so much the violence that I'm talking about, in the sense of I'm okay with violence. I'm not passive on anything like that. I'm okay with violence. What I'm saying is there's a certain level of excessive violence that I'm starting to see in certain films right now, in order to show even furthermore that this guy's bad, or that this guy is... So, for example, there's a scene where somebody gets stabbed. That's fine. But then there's a scene where somebody gets stabbed in the face and you see the knife going through the jaw.
Cool.
Yeah, this is one of many scenes where it's just you get to the point where just they were doing it for the shock effect.
If you go back and you look at a lot of action-y type movies from the 80s, it was violent.
Sure.
It was violence that
Sure.
sold. Why is it not that acceptable today?
Okay, let's pick RoboCop, right? One of the more violent films of the 80s that you're alluding to. There's some great violence in that movie.
Some
But the
fantastic
movie
violence.
holds up without the violence, and people still talk about that film, and there's a lot of great stuff in that film besides the violence.
Yeah.
People talk about Equalizer or the new Daredevil series in relation to the violence. You take that stuff away, the substance becomes very meaningless. That's where I'm alluding to, is that what makes the Equalizer popular, at least from what it is I've been able to see from different reviews and so on, and other popular opinions polls, is that it's because it's violent.
So the violence is what eventually sold the movie and what made people enjoy it.
I guess so, but I find that it lacks substance in any other form, that the characters aren't very interesting, the plot sucks, none of the dialogue is very good, whereas you take a movie like Taken, where there's lots of violence, but the way it's set up is so much better.
So you're saying like the violence is a means to an end? Or
No, it's you're watching a great movie and then there's violence put into it and it works with the film. Whereas the movie's very disbalanced, very, very uninteresting, and then there's violence put into it just in order to make it, then not just violence, but more graphic violence. Like further than a movie like Taken or James Bond or other films take it, is they push to a higher level of violence in order to make this film have that like rated R rating, or have that like stand out in some way.
have it appeal to somebody?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that scene in The Equalizer where he walks into the room there with all the goons and he starts killing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could have been played off a lot less violent, especially with his skill set, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that he could go through and probably disarm them all and seriously wound them and or incapacitate them in some other way, shape, or form than, jamming the knife up through some guy's jaw or bottle in the face.
Yeah. That scene becomes the movie rather than that scene being just in the movie.
Okay, I get you now.
So when I take a step back and I think about what are the coolest scenes in the movie, in some sense it is the violence, but that doesn't make a movie. That makes just excessive scenes of violence.
Yeah, so in other words, it's story with subtle violence. Could still be graphic violence, but it needs to play to the story. It just can't be in there for the sake of being in there.
Yeah, let me put it this way. If you had the violence that you had in Equalizer put into Taken, I think that would have worked. Made it Taken a much more serious film, especially if you did it with the second or third one. It would have upped the kind of action film into a much more serious action film, which Equalizer was going with, whereas Taken was kind of going on a lighter, stupider kind of action film.
All right. So overall impressions on the Equalizer then. Was there anything that you enjoyed about the movie?
Well, I like the TV show. The movie made me watch the TV show, and I actually really like the TV show.
Did you continue with the TV show?
I actually wanted to give the TV show a few more episodes in order to see where it goes a little bit. For the movie, yeah, I like Denzel trying to do the cool thing. It's always fun to watch, even though it is repetitive, and he's done it in many other films.
Denzel being Denzel Washington.
Denzel being Denzel. Some of the way the scenes were, again, the only thing I can really comment on is some of the action was cool. Some of the setups of the action scenes were well done. And I liked his meticulous way of beating up the thugs in that one room there. That was cool. But when it comes to did I like the movie? No, because there isn't very much of the movie there to like.
None of the characters were likable for you.
Well,
there's just lack
you've
of
seen
substance.
it. You've seen it. Tell me, what do you like about the movie?
I'm going to be honest. I like the violence.
Yeah.
And that's about all I can really say.
Does that make
Once
it
again,
a good movie?
No, it doesn't make it a good movie. It makes it good eye candy.
Yeah.
Shock value and being like, ooh. But yeah, other than that, it's Denzel Washington playing the same character he's probably played for like the last 20 years. And other than that, no other characters really spring to mind as like, oh, that was a really cool character, or that person did a good job doing this. It truly was just
about the violence.
Yeah.
Now, going back on the final note, that violence is great, and it should be put into films that deserve it. For example, the last RoboCop film, or a Taken movie, or various other films where they just go too soft, and then the movie just becomes bland.
You still need to watch John Wick, right?
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to what you think about that.
All right. Yeah, it's on my list of 2014 films that I'm trying to catch up on before 2015 is out. Among the lists of articles that I'm going to be writing between now and the end of the year are the best of films of 2014. The reason why I'm covering 2014 because a year has passed. Their scores on IMDb have settled. They've gone through the theater. They've gone through DVD and Blu-ray, and some of them came and gone on Netflix. And people have seen a lot of these films. So when it comes to what status a certain film has, it usually takes about a year. So one of the rules of the MetaFilm Project has to do with the fact that a film needs a year before you can really identify it. So I'll be writing a little bit about 2015, at the end of 2015. But besides even box office, you can't really do a good assessment of 2015 until way into 2016, when a lot of the figures are in and a lot of the data is set and people have voted online and all these kind of things. So John Wick came out exactly a year ago, October 2014, and it now has nearly 200,000 reviews online. So it's run its course. I can say how much money it made, I can say approximately what score it has, and I can say whether or not people are into it. And as a film with nearly 200,000 reviews, that is a popular film. That is one of the most popular films of 2014 when it comes to ticks, even though it made no money in the box office. So there's an interesting contrast there of what films are popular even though they didn't make money in the box office.
Everything can find second life outside the theater.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
That's why box office tells you one thing, but you really need like a good year later to see what has remained popular
Well, when you think about it, a lot of those votes come from people going out and buying it or seeing it on stream or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll vote later on. Even after 6 months, it'll come out, and then more people will vote on it for those who don't go to the theater.
But still, looking at the most popular films of 2014, most of the films are the films that made a lot of money. So the article I wrote about most successful films of 2014 and right now the most popular films of 2014, they match up. There's quite a few overlapping things, but then again, there's a few films in there that are a little bit different, like The Interview.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to see that.
Or Fault in Our Stars, or
Well,
Nightcrawler, or Theory of Everything. There's what you're seeing here, Imitation Game. What you're seeing here is now a mix between the best of 2014 and the most money made in 2014. That's kind of the films that have the most ticks online are kind of a hybrid of those two, which makes sense. But sometimes it's films like John Wick, which didn't make money, nor is it one of the best films of 2014 in terms of ratings. It's just popular. And especially in a few years from now, as films kind of move up in their ticks, you see which films have stood the test of time and still brought out a certain amount of appeal. For example, Maze Runner, or Divergent, or what other films am I seeing here? Neighbors, the Lego Movie.
You know what? I watched the Lego Movie recently, and as good as it was, I don't agree with everybody that had all their grievances with it, didn't get Best Animated Feature, or its due. I mean, it was a good movie, but was it really that good?
I was disappointed watching the Lego Movie. I was really excited to see it from the trailer, and I came out disappointed because the trailer gave it off as being very sharp and on the ball, like Robot Chicken or Family Guy, or films that try to keep the jokes just coming at you.
Quick wit from the very start.
Yeah, quick wit from the very start, and it looked like they were putting one joke on top of the other joke and just keep it going all the time. Like you seeing the Ninja Turtles in the background and having Superman there. They had an opportunity to cross franchises in a way that no other film could ever do that. And the trailer gave it off with such charm and wit and excitement that made it so funny that I couldn't wait to see the film. And then all that stuff was in the film, but it was just slower.
Yeah, the pacing was pretty off.
I don't know if it's so much the pacing as much as the jokes. Is there would be a joke, then there would be exposition, then there would be a joke, and then there would be exposition. It seems to me that that's what was missing from the film. It needed to have a stronger baseline of funny. All
right, so now you have your list of movies that you have to finish by the end of the year.
Yep.
That's good. A few of those I know I'm gonna end up watching.
Well, hopefully by the end of the year we'll look back and actually have a full discussion on 2014 and maybe a discussion on 2015. We'll do maybe both. That'll be the one episode we're going to do. And yeah, and we'll do that towards the end of the year. I have a question to ask you.
Shoot.
I'm developing the next edition of the MetaFilm list, and I came across something online, which is something that people have brought up. I use IMDb primarily. People said, well, why don't you use Rotten Tomatoes? Well, the Rotten Tomatoes, you can't search by audience score. You can only search by critic score. And that is interesting for itself, sure. And that's why Rotten Tomatoes is popular, because you're interested to see what a amalgamated critic review of a film is.
Okay.
But what I'm interested in is audience scores, and for Rotten Tomatoes, you can't search by audience score to see what audiences think and how that matches up towards IMDb. But if I were to ask you, what if there was another website exactly the same as IMDb that worked on the same principle, user votes towards films, and they voted on some of the same films that are on IMDb, and the score is slightly different?
Okay.
So the MetaFilm list works on the principle of 9,000 votes and a score of 8.0 or above. So would you say an equivalent system to IMDb, 9,000 users have voted on a film to be over 8.0, and IMDb does not? Would you say that film is an 8.0 film, would you approach this second website?
Okay, well, you were explaining that a lot of them are critic-based as opposed to audience-based. Is this website audience-based?
Yes.
It's all the votes, everything's tabulated, comes from people who have actually seen the movie and are just your regular moviegoers.
Yes.
If I had access to a website where 9,000 people
Or more
voted on a movie that have seen it and gave it an 8.0, I would be inclined to see that movie.
Okay. The reason why I bring this up is because there's a website called Alexa, which tells you how popular a certain website is and where it's popular. And they show you a little world map, and they show you where it's popular. Now, IMDb is primarily used in the English-speaking world. There used to be an IMDb GR, an IMDb FR, and IMDb set in different languages. They've amalgamated all of them into just one website called IMDb, and you can adjust some of the language settings. But even then, the website is predominantly in English, and since they've done that, there have been offshoot IMDb-type websites developing in different languages. And I came across a Chinese one, and I came across a Russian one, which has users voting on films, but the website is not in English. So what Rotten Tomatoes with the audience score rating and IMDb really exemplifies is what the English-speaking audiences think. Even though films, you can click on them and they have statistics telling you what proportion of the film ratings are American and non-American, their statistics match up with this Alexa website that basically says about 60% of all the votes on IMDb are American, which matches up to almost any film. And it is used by India, Australia, Canada, the UK, Ireland, New Zealand. These are the places that primarily use IMDb.
Okay.
Other places that English is not their primary focus use at various different websites that have a similar principle of voting on certain films. Now, what is interesting is localized film, for example, the Spanish speakers voting on Spanish films and the Russian speakers voting on Russian films, which may not be as accessible to the English audience. That's interesting because you get to find out what these films are.
Yeah.
But when it comes to non-English audiences voting on English films on a different server,
yeah, you don't get a very good look at how popular it is in other places.
So I'm right now kind of trying to figure out, do I average the two out? How should I approach this and in order to make a more comprehensive list? Because it's not just about what the English-speaking audience thinks of these films. I'm trying to build a unanimous view of what a film score should be.
You want a worldwide perspective. You don't want just a country perspective. You want the grand design. I don't know if there exists a website where it would tabulate or take from different websites the score from reputable sites, say like Empire, to fan-run sites.
When it comes to critics like Empire or the LA Times or things like that, that's what Rotten Tomatoes does. It still focuses on the English-speaking world, more or less. They do expand to different countries, and they are trying to make their platform a little bit more interesting, but we're still talking about what critics think when it comes to newspapers and publications and things like that. What I'm interested in is user votes. So if 9,000 people in Greece think a movie is good and 9,000 people in France think the same movie is good, shouldn't that be combined with the 9,000 plus people who think the movie may or may not be good on IMDb to create a more unified score?
Sure. I think that would be a great idea.
So that's what I'm currently working on in the next phase of the MetaFilm List project.
How do you propose to do that? Obviously, there's going to be fluctuations in votes.
Yep.
There's going to be fluctuations in ratings. Well, one country might give it an 8.0 and the other one might give it a 7.7. So obviously you are going to look for an average. I'll have to figure out that average depending on voters and whatnot. I'm not a programmer by any means.
Mm-hmm.
If you found the right person that you could work with on it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can build an application that would take ratings from all these different websites,
Mm-hmm.
including critic scores if you want to count them,
Mm-hmm.
Tabulate it all, round the 5 out of 5s to 10 out of 10s if that's the way you want to keep it,
Mm-hmm.
and then factor it all in and give you an actual worldwide rating on it.
Mm-hmm.
So North America gives it an 8, the UK gives it a 7.7, and then Asia gives it a 7.9, and then you just factor it all in mathematically. You would have to create a program for it, obviously.
All right. Well, I've been working with a guy, and he has done just that.
That's awesome.
Our first experiment was Rotten Tomatoes, because so many people use Rotten Tomatoes, and you can't search by audience score. So the challenge for Rajesh was to create a script that could compare Rotten Tomatoes to IMDb. And I'm currently working with him to try to build a program that actually does just that. And I've had the pleasure of looking through a Excel spreadsheet of everything that's on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes and how they match up, and compare the two and see what is agreed upon and what critics don't agree on, and I'll be writing some articles exactly on that theme in the months to come.
That's awesome. Because IMDb is heavily user-based, and obviously Rotten Tomatoes is very critic-based.
But you can vote on Rotten Tomatoes, you just can't search by user votes.
Obviously there's a way that you could probably find that out through whatever data is coming through.
If you go on Rotten Tomatoes right now and you pick a film, on the screen you will see the main score that they use, which is the tomato meter, and right next to it you see the audience score. The reason why I've never bothered with it because I didn't want to manually look through every single film and compare it. But if you have somebody who can collect all that information using a program, then you can have a program compare the two, and it makes it all that much easier. So take a film, for example. This is an interesting choice. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, 2014. This film was recommended to me, and it was voted very high by critics, but not as high by audience scores, both on IMDb and on Rotten Tomatoes. So critics loved this film, whereas audiences liked it less. I've been recommended to watch this film, and I actually am starting to get really interested. It's a new kind of mix between graphic novel, horror, spaghetti western, and Iranian New Wave. It's about a vampire who lives in Iran.
Okay.
This movie came up identified at the top of the list of 2014 of films critics loved but audiences didn't.
I don't want to say critics are a bad thing, but sometimes I find that something that the critic would give a high score to, I don't end up enjoying, but something that they would give a low score to, I end up enjoying.
Looking at what critics think help you understand awards, I find.
That I can see.
So I think I'll be exploring in the future a comparison between what critics think and the Academy Award results, and how that compares to what audiences think. So Girl Walks Home Alone at Night has a 7.1, and critics gave it a 8.0. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 7.6 from users. It's lower, drops below my radar on an 8.0 scale,
Yeah.
but critics gave it a much higher rating. So it kind of fluctuates back onto it, and it's been personally recommended to me, so I think that's going to be coming back. So, yeah, I just wanted to hear kind of some thoughts on that.
I would be more inclined to find out a global then. But wouldn't that render like a lot of these other websites kind of? Well, I guess it wouldn't render them pointless. I mean, if you're pulling information from them, you would still need them.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just giving it more, everybody. Like if you want a broader look on how many people liked this movie or didn't like this movie, this is the number you want.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. I think that's fantastic that you're actually working on that.
Well, I've reached out to some people who have the skills, and they've been able to pull it off. So I thank Rajesh for his hard work, and I'll be putting a link to his website in the show notes.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to checking it out now.
You've seen Poltergeist.
Yes, I have. Now, to start off, I'm a big fan of the original. I love Poltergeist 1983, and I always have. It's one of those movies that I sit down and I watch every Halloween, and I've always enjoyed it. It's one of those movies that go either way for a lot of people. They either like it or they don't like it. So obviously, when I found out that they were remaking it, I had to watch the remake.
Mm-hmm.
So I recently sat down and watched Poltergeist that was released this year. The original Poltergeist in 83 was directed by Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So when Steven Spielberg wanted to make...
Steven Spielberg wrote the screenplay for Poltergeist. I did not know that.
And he also executive produced it. Another interesting point about Poltergeist 1983 is that it was filmed on the exact same street at the same time that Steven Spielberg was filming E.T. Steven Spielberg would have directed Poltergeist, but due to Director Guild laws or guidelines, a director couldn't have two films in the same year. So he hired Tobe Hooper to direct Poltergeist.
Are those laws still in effect? That doesn't sound right.
I'm not really sure. I don't think so. Not anymore. But back in '83, that's what happened. It stopped a director from having too many good movies out at the same time.
I'm sorry, man. I have to be compulsive about this. According to IMDb, it's 82.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. I got that completely wrong. Either way, 1982 came out the same year as E.T.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, let's break into Poltergeist 2015. It's definitely more of a modern retelling. As a movie itself, it did nothing to set itself apart from the original. It used a lot of story elements from the original, but weakly. In the original Poltergeist, there was this awesome scene where their first horrible encounter with the poltergeist, a tree comes in and starts eating this boy. Literally starts eating this child, to the point where you see the tree sucking in this kid. In Poltergeist 2015, they kept the tree scene in, but instead of the tree eating the kid, it just swung the kid around lazily and then dropped him on the ground.
And this is a PG film, the original.
The original is a PG film.
And the remake is PG-13.
The remake is PG-13. Now, here's a couple other things. So it plays out like your normal paranormal movie. Family moves into a house. There's strange things that go on in it, which leads to your normal jump scare fare, I guess, today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a down on their luck family. They move into a new house because they have no choice, and it comes with a poltergeist that wants to get out. So the way the story goes is that there was this housing community. They built it on an old gravesite. They moved all the headstones, but they left all the bodies behind, and now evil spirits want to be taken to a happier place and need to use somebody in order to do that.
I'm just thinking how much that's exactly the same as The Shining, which was 1980 and written before that. So it makes me just look at the original Poltergeist and be like, you guys are just ripping off a film that was much better from a few years before.
But I like the way that the original Poltergeist was set up. It was a very happy family who had lived in this, like the original Poltergeist in '82. Their father was a real estate agent, and they lived in this place called Cuesta Verde, and he would, sell the houses and develop the housing projects and everything like that until he finds out literally that they moved the headstones, but they never moved the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The original plays heavily on paranormal activity. They actually explain to you.
I remember dishes flying, and I remember like furniture moving around and things like that.
Yeah, it's what poltergeists do. Except, within the confines of the movie, a poltergeist is a nastier element than, say, a haunting. A haunting is just, stuff happens, flickers, and then it disappears after a while, where a poltergeist will stick around for a while. Like I said, it plays heavily on what people know of parapsychology or paranormal activity.
Ghosts?
Yeah.
Is that what is really like a simplified way to understand poltergeists? Are they ghosts that move stuff?
They're evil ghosts.
They're evil ghosts?
Yeah, they're evil ghosts that mess with you and mess with your chi and mess with your home and make walls bleed and make you want to leave. They don't want you there.
Is this the movie with the bleeding walls?
No, that's Amityville.
Okay.
So anyways, in
Get out.
82 was based heavily more upon fear. There was a lot, like for a PG movie, they got away with
fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. In 82, they got away with a lot of stuff in that movie. There was the tree eating the little kid, like dead bodies like coming out of the ground, and like very scary elements.
I think what I remember of the original film was it was fear of the unknown. It was the room was scary. It was we didn't know what this thing was. The word poltergeist was kind of this word that was used, but no one really understood what it meant. So it falls into kind of like Outbreak, these other one-word film titles that come to mind that try to exemplify on one particular concept or idea. The Exorcist, The Omen, arachnophobia. That this was one of those things that you went to go see this because you've heard of the word poltergeist, it had something to do with ghosts, but you didn't know necessarily. And the movie built on that kind of, you're not sure you understand what this thing means. Gremlins.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like, Poltergeist 82 was very based on fear and the fear of the unknown. No one knew what was going on. No one's ever seen anything like this. Whereas Poltergeist 2015 came off more as your standard jump scare, I don't even know how to put it,
shock horror?
I wouldn't even say shock horror. There wasn't really anything scary in the film itself. Like, the only thing that 2015 did better than 82 was they showed you what was on the other side.
Okay.
Like when they have to travel to get the little girl back, and the little girl goes missing in both of them, albeit for different reasons. In 2015, you actually get to see them travel through the other side, which is this awesome warped perception of their house, and instead of walls and stairs, it's all these bodies intertwined and locking in to make the walls and the structures of the house.
Okay.
Which was really cool, and probably the best part in the movie was to see that. Whereas in the original one, you didn't get to see the other side.
Probably because of limited budget.
But for a limited budget, the things they pulled off in 82 were fantastic. Like, there's a scene where this giant beast shows up in front of the kid's door, and
I remember that. That was really cool.
It's this giant apparition, and their mom's trying to get in, and it just starts screaming at her. She's pushed back against the wall, and she's screaming in fear as this thing is screaming at her to, like, get away. Their closet turns into this giant, like, worm type thing and tries to eat them. It's fantastic, the things they pulled off in 82 with the limitations in effects. Whereas in 2015, I feel that all the effects were blown on the scene where they're going through the other side to get the girl and bring her back out. Also, too, 2015 has a faster pace, wherein everything happens really, really quickly. They try to explain things to you, but you're kind of lost on it because they're moving so quickly and they want to get through to it. 2015 is about an hour and 45 minutes, whereas 82 is a little over 2 hours. And it was the pacing that threw me off a bit too, whereas I like the slow build of 82 because after everything's said and done and after they get the girl back, they go through this nice little, like, 5 to 10 minute period where everything's peace and calm. They're moving out of the house. They're like, we're going to get away. We've been through all this crazy stuff and we just want to escape. And just when they think that they're good, more stuff starts happening. Which leads to the end of the movie where the house gets sucked into this little tiny, like,
I remember
portal.
That's pretty cool.
There's a lot of cool things in 82, and in 2015 it didn't even felt like an homage. It was definitely felt like a rushed remake. I was hoping that Sam Rockwell would do something cool in that movie, but to be honest with you, I think Sam Rockwell was just there for a paycheck because his acting was terrible in that movie.
Who would you say the target audience was of the new film? Because the reason why I bring that up is because even though it's PG-13, typically a horror film, and this thing's identified as horror thriller online. Typically a horror film is 18A or rated R or whatever, and when you're going into PG-13 territory of a horror film, you're getting into this middle ground where it doesn't really work, or it's very, very hard for it to work. Which is why when I look online and see user ratings of what the best PG-13 horror film is, I guess it's World War Z. That's the most successful PG-13 Cloverfield, I guess.
For, like, the demographic that it was meant for is kind of confusing within the movie. There's elements that, okay, we're going for the teenage audience. There's elements where we're going for the adult audience, and there was really no clear demographic. This is a movie that was rated PG in 1982. There is a scene in that movie where a dude rips his face off, where he's standing in front of a mirror. Okay, and the ghosts are, like, the poltergeists are messing with him, and it's an entire scene of him pulling off his face until there's nothing but like a mangled skull underneath it.
That's not PG appropriate.
That's PG 82, as opposed to PG 13, which was 2015, and you got nothing like that. Nothing.
While we're on this note, quick side shoot. PG films that are designated horror. PG.
Okay.
And if you hear this list, it's actually not that bad. So you got Poltergeist, Gremlins, Jaws 2, Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978, the 2012 Frankenweenie Tim Burton movie, Scooby-Doo 2, Twilight Zone the movie, the 79 remake of Nosferatu, the Werner Herzog film, Ernest Scared Stupid, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and The Stepford Wives, the original film.
Okay. Now, out of those films that you've just mentioned, people physically die in Gremlins.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gremlins is scarier than PG.
All right, there are some very genuine scary scenes in the original Gremlins movie. It was designed to be a scary movie, unlike Gremlins 2: The New Batch, which was designed as more of a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Out of all those movies that you've mentioned, the two worst out of them are Poltergeist and Gremlins for the sheer level of fear, shock, death.
Scenes inappropriate for young audiences.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, a PG movie where a dude rips his face off.
But I bring it up because when I ask you about who do you think this movie is designed for, when I look at the horror films that are rated PG-13, the first list was very short. There was only 17 results that came out with that one. With PG-13, there are more results, but the crowd that these films belong to are not very good. So there's Dracula Untold, and Dark Shadows, and Vampire Academy, and Warm Bodies, The Ring, A Cloverfield, The Others, Island of Dr. Moreau, Little Shop of Horrors, Red Riding Hood, Spawn, Drag Me to Hell, Tremors, The Grudge.
Really?
The thing
Genuinely some scary moments in some of those films.
Scrolling through, do you know what the average score for most of these films are? Like 5 point something.
Well, it's horror. What do you want? We're talking about one of the lowest rated movie genres in history. Like, these are way more for entertainment value than looking for something with substance in it.
I think what I'm hitting on here is the PG horror films were films of substance. The list that Poltergeist belongs to, their peers, are better films. The PG-13 horror films, if you go through this list, it is incredibly difficult to pull off a PG-13 horror film and make it good. All these films that I'm looking through this list, all of them suck because...
What's the difference between PG and PG-13? PG-13, what, you have to be 13 with a parent? Whereas a PG movie, you just have to have a parent with you? So if you ask me, PG rated should be a little bit more lenient than a PG-13 movie. But you have a PG-13 movie, a PG movie where a dude rips his face off, and then a PG-13 movie where vampires are sucking people dry, or whatnot. Okay, like, I'm pretty sure I saw Poltergeist when I was very young because my parents were probably like, "Hey, it's rated PG," and then I was severely scarred for a long time.
Well, this will tie into a conversation that we're going to have later about Scarface, but so we'll talk about it briefly right now and bring it back then. So, looking up Wikipedia, of course, PG says parents urged to give parental guidance may contains some material parents may not like for their young children,
Like a dude ripping his face off.
on a box it says some material may not be suitable for children. Now PG-13 say parents are urged to be cautious. Some material may be inappropriate for preteens. On the box, it says some material may be inappropriate for children under 13. So there's not necessarily a restriction on who can see it. It's just it has to do with parental guidance.
We're also talking about a movie that was made in 1982 versus a movie that was made like this year. All right, I'm sure the rating system back in the 80s was completely different than what it is now.
But a lot of these things are actually updated. You have films back in the day which had a different rating to the rating that they have today. The film is re-released on DVD, and it does actually get re-examined by modern MPAA ratings in order to get slightly upgraded.
Okay.
So films that may have been rated R before may not necessarily be rated R today.
Interesting. Regardless of the fact, the rating system has changed.
Yeah.
Dramatically. And to be honest with you, if Poltergeist 82 is still getting a PG rating, I'm frankly surprised.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I guarantee you, if I were to sit down an 8, 9, or 10-year-old child with me to watch Poltergeist 82, that kid's going to be messed up afterwards.
Yeah.
There's going to be points in that, like, I guarantee you that kid's not going to make it past the dude ripping his face off. By the way, the reason why I've mentioned it so much is that it's one of the best scenes in the movie and one of the best mistakes in the movie.
Mistakes? What do you mean mistakes?
So he's staring into a mirror, okay, and the light starts to glow as if he's getting really, really hot and stuff like that. And then he starts picking stuff off his face, and then he just starts peeling it. And peeling
I remember that.
But to do it, to rip the skin off the model, his hands were reversed. So his left became his right, and his right became his left. So it was.
Oh, it made it even creepier because his hands are twisted.
Yeah, his hands were backwards. It was really weird. It was really cool.
I'm just looking at the list of. There's 119 films that come out that are PG-13, and all of them have terrible ratings. All of them. They're all 5.8, 6.2 films or lower. 3.6 for The Fog. I think what I'm getting at here is that when you're going for PG, it seems that those films are slightly better when it comes to horror because there's horror elements in it, but the primary film is they're still focusing on trying to make it an interesting film. But when you're going PG-13 for a horror film, most of these films have awful ratings simply because to find that guideline, that balance between good and parental guidance necessary, most films fail on that. The only films that really stand out are The Others, The Ring, Cloverfield, or World War Z. The rest here it's a very, very hard line to walk, whereas most horror films, if you just simply whitewash it, are rated R. They're higher rated films because to be really horror, you have to be a little bit more.
You've got to go the slasher route. You've got to go the body count, the burn bright and fast. It's about death toll.
There are 2
gore
rated G horror films.
This should be good.
The Haunting, 1963, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954.
Oh, cool.
Those are the only 2 rated G horror films. And then, what's NC-17 mean? NC-17 means clearly adult. Children are not allowed. Whereas rated R means contains some adult material. Parents are urged to learn more about the film before taking their young children to them.
But a rated R movie can be just as simple as having too many swears in it, though. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
You put enough swears into a movie, you're going to get an R rating.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you put a pair of breasts in a movie, you get a rated R.
Yeah. Typing in rated R for horror films, now there are 554 films that come out. And here you have more known films. Halloween, Alien, Sleepy Hollow, Psycho, The Shining, Aliens, Predator,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, there it is. Nightmare on Elm Street, Sweeney Todd, Scream, The Exorcist. See, when you're talking about horror goes hand in hand with rated R or NC-17. To go lower than that is a very, very difficult line to go. And that's why I've always been really impressed with The Ring, because The Ring was able to pull off really something. The Ring and The Others where it was able to pull off something really interesting without going graphic, without going psychological, without going graphic. It was creepy and it was horror, but nothing really happened in those films. A girl with long hair covered in water comes out of a TV.
Oh, tell me how not creepy that was.
That was very creepy, but it's PG-13 material. Yeah. It was done really, really well.
So this is for everybody out there. If you actually want to sit down and watch this and actually give us some feedback on it, watch Poltergeist 1982 and tell me what you think it should be rated. Because as of right now, a PG rating on that, no way I'm going to sit a kid down and watch that.
Fair enough. I'm thinking the same thing for Gremlins.
But regardless of the fact, Poltergeist 2015 did a very poor job of capturing what the original tried to do. All the scenes were low key. They did nothing. And in an industry where horror movies or thrillers have even more shock value, they did nothing to up the bar at all. They did nothing to compete with the original Poltergeist.
It sounds like a quick cash grab.
If you're ever going to watch a Poltergeist movie, I suggest you sit down and watch Poltergeist 82. And there's a lot more to it than just the movie itself. There's a lot of history with the making of the film too that really makes it what it is. There's people that fight over who actually directed the film. Was Steven Spielberg just using Tobe Hooper as a kind of puppet so he could make that horror movie that he wanted to make? There's all kinds of superstitions surrounding the film. The final scene where they're trying to escape the house as it implodes on itself. Bodies are coming up out of the ground, out of the swimming pool that they're trying to make in the backyard before the house goes to heck. The bodies that they use are actual cadavers because it was cheaper than making actual mock-ups.
So I have a question.
Shoot.
2 questions, actually. So the last scene in the first season of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where the Technodrome sucks in on itself and disappears, is that basically modeled on Poltergeist?
A lot of stuff that you like. There's a lot of plays on that. They did an episode of it in The Simpsons where the house implodes on itself during one of the Halloween specials.
Mm-hmm.
The one where they go in and the house tries to drive them nuts, but the family drives the house nuts instead, and then the house is like, I've had enough of this, and then it implodes on itself. It's been widely used, and to be honest with you, I think the first one that did it was Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
The special effects in '82 were spectacular too, compared to even 2015, where a lot of it felt.
It sounds like a cash grab to me. It sounds like they just tried to throw it out, see if they can make a little bit of money, and if they did, they did. And same thing with Sam. It sounds like exactly the same thing for Sam Rockwell. Is that he wanted to make a little bit of money. He didn't care.
I needed a paycheck.
He needed a paycheck. He wanted to buy some smokes.
I was hoping Sam Rockwell would have done something really cool in that movie, but he came, like, his acting came off very bland, and I really didn't know anybody else in that film, nor did I really care by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would suggest to people out there, watch Poltergeist 82. Read up on it too. There's a lot of interesting facts about this movie.
I think there's like a book written about it.
There is. There is a book written about it.
So Poltergeist 2015, thumbs down?
Oh, totally. I only watched it for the sake of watching it because I love the original. It was a remake.
What would you give it?
Oh, I'd give it like a 4.
Okay, fair enough.
What I'd give 82, I'd give it a solid 8 or a 9.
Cool.
Yeah, just because it's fantastic. It's very well done. It's well executed. It definitely plays on the fear of the unknown, and you will be scared while watching it.
People were talking about Tomorrowland this summer, as before it came out, as going to be one of the big hits of the summer, and it was a flop. It was not successful, but I liked it, and you didn't?
I started liking the movie. I really did. You're talking about a movie called Tomorrowland, and in the trailer they show you this awesome city of the future, and you're like, oh, this looks awesome, and there's stuff happening, there's people flying around in flying cars and jetpacks, and there's robots, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then I start watching the movie, and the opening was solid.
Okay.
You know, you're going through, you're seeing the boys' past, on how we got there, on bringing all the world's scientists together to create this world of the future and to make great leaps and bounds within technology itself. And then it just goes into reality on today's world, where it's all fear and technology seems to have come to a standstill and things are going bad and the world's in a bad state. And then you don't really get to see, you just get to see them trying to get to the city.
This magical city. This
magical city, only to have it, only when you get there finally, that it's all beat up and decayed.
Yeah, I didn't really get how it was both magical and futuristic and beat up and decayed at the same time.
I know, and then by the time you get to the end, it was very anticlimactic, and then you get to see like them recruiting everybody, and then we're going to make the city over again. It felt mishmashed, and so the overall message of the movie was also like, coming from Disney, we want, fresh ideas and use your imagination, and it's such a big part of you, but don't use it too much because we still want your money.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves for a second. So, first of all, I looked it up, and the movie made $208 million worldwide, 93 million in the States, and 115 in the rest of the world. That's pretty bad when it comes to modern day summer blockbuster science fiction type films.
Yeah.
So it currently ranks 588 overall worldwide and 665 domestic in terms of U.S. domestic. That's really bad. So that's considered like a flop considering its budget and attention and promotion campaign and all that kind of stuff. But so what is it about? It's about back in the 50s or whatever? They started building a super future city for elite minds to be able to go and create, and somehow they put that city in another dimension so that normal people couldn't see it, and it's basically the city's in a field somewhere.
They were doing it for the greater good of humanity.
So in this field, while the rest of the world was falling apart, there was a city where there's people with jetpacks and so on and so forth happening at the same time, but you couldn't actually physically get there by just walking to the field. Yeah. So this girl gets this pin that helps her see the city but not interact with it, right?
Yeah, but they explain that in the movie.
I know, but I'm just kind of following because later at the end of the movie they're releasing pins to more people so they can come to the city, but then they can't come to the city.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, that's the one part I kind of got lost on. So she was in the city, but at the same time people were like walking around her and they couldn't see her and all this other stuff.
But they explain that though. It was a commercial for it. They were supposed to open the city to the public, but then George Clooney's character ended up making a clock that foretold the end of the world, and then they closed its doors to everybody.
Okay. I think we're hitting on the key flaw with the film, that there's this pin that helps you go to this magical place, that it exists in physical, like where everyone else in real life. It's not another dimension or something. It physically is there. But what you visit may not actually be what actually is there, and then when later they don't have the pin, they have to go through this obscurely crazy transport thing with the Eiffel Tower in order to get there again. And it's not really clear in the film of what is Tomorrowland, where is it, how do you get there? And the whole film is about that, but it's so unclear of what's going on when it comes to that structure of that plot. So I still don't really get that. Was Tomorrowland all destroyed at the end of the film? And
it just fell into disrepair because nobody was doing anything. They had shut the doors. They didn't want to share their technology with the rest of the world because the world was going to destroy itself because of the clock that George Clooney made.
But would it destroy Tomorrowland as well, and then they just gave up?
Oh, we don't know. They never explained that one.
That's what we're hitting on in terms of its main drawbacks.
There wasn't a lot of explanation for a lot of things in that movie.
Yeah.
Like even the robots that they sent out to hunt these people down. There was no explanation on why they were there or how they were made. Or
do you feel that there's 20 minutes cut out of the film?
I feel there's a lot cut out in the film. I feel like you could have made it easier, like at least another half an hour.
It was already 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Okay, so maybe another 20 minutes of explanation. You'd have 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I was expecting this awesome, like, kind of retro-style science fiction movie, the way they were playing it off.
Yeah.
But I didn't get that at all.
Do you think Disney is too caught up with itself?
I think Disney doesn't care. This is interesting because the message that the movie was trying to get out there was, the world is in a sad state of affairs, but, be creative and, think for yourself and stuff like that. Whereas Disney's kind of, as a company, Disney itself kind of goes against that.
Okay.
We're talking about a company that has the ability to make whatever they want to make, whether it be a flop like John Carter or Tomorrowland, or make really good movies like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Focusing on Tomorrowland, what I liked about the film has to do with the fact that it was trying to show optimism in a way that optimism hasn't been shown in many films, especially as of late. There's a lot of post-apocalyptic films out there. There's a lot of films about how the world is falling apart. And there's a lot of films about how the ice caps are melting and the ozone is falling apart and all the whales are dying and all the polar bears are dying and how we're all dying. And, there's a lot of negativity out there, and we all look at that negativity and we become so placid and passive when it comes to a lot of the negativity out there. And when it comes to science fiction movies, there aren't any positive science fiction movies. So most films don't even have the audacity to show you the future anymore. And if they show you the future, it's always bad. Always, always, always bad. Back in the 80s, Back to the Future 2, we come back to this film. They tried to show you a future that isn't bad, that is just the future. It is what it is, doesn't matter, from their particular standpoint. But in this, at least the point that they're trying to do, which is interesting, is at least they're trying to show you that the future could be awesome. And that's what Back to the Future 2 did a little bit. They showed you flying cars, and they showed you like clean streets, and they showed you like the pond in front of the place was like crystal clear blue, and they tried to show you more about all the things you could look forward to. And we're still talking about the flying car and the flying skateboard and all that kind of stuff because they're showing you this kind of stuff. And I think Star Wars and Star Trek do that a little bit, but they're so far away from present day that it just becomes fantasy more than anything else because it has no relevance to reality.
I get the optimism that Tomorrowland's trying to pass off, and yes, optimism is a good thing, especially amongst, like you said, all the depressing things that are happening today. The one thing that I don't like is that this one girl is responsible for it all.
Yeah, that's very much the Jesus chosen one.
Yeah, she comes in and then all of a sudden the clock ticks back one and everybody's like, "Oh my God, she's going to be the one that's going to save the world and get everybody to start believing, clapping their hands." And yay,
believing in fairies.
I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it could play off the optimism more and make like all these downtrodden characters starting being more optimistic, then I would almost believe that they could have passed it off. But everybody's all like disgruntled and grumpy. And
so just quickly finishing up Tomorrowland. So what would you give the film?
I would give Tomorrowland probably a 6.
I gave it a 7 only because if you think about the scene of them in the house, for example, or the scene of them in the Eiffel Tower as another example, individual scenes from that movie, including them in Tomorrowland, it already stands out as being something more than just a regular good film. There's some really amazing elements in that. Some of the fight scenes with the little robot and some of the people, or I bring out the house scene again. The way that house scene was filmed as a sequence, Brad Bird directing, them moving around this giant house with booby traps and so on and so forth, and robots coming in through all the walls and stuff like that, coming at them and setting off these booby traps.
I'm not disagreeing with you that some of the scenes are really good. I personally like the ones where they fight the robots in the shop, and they had like those really cool retro styled like 50s black and white kind of laser guns, and they're like shooting up the place, and then she comes in with the little time bubble and they're frozen there, and like some of the scenes were really good. It's the plot and the story and the structure of the movie that really takes it away from me.
Yeah. When it comes to Brad Bird, it's the directing that I thought the movie was phenomenal. He directed The Incredibles, he directed Up, he directed Ratatouille. He's an amazing director, and he's moving into live action films. I didn't like Ghost Protocol very much, which was his first live action film. This is his second. But at least with the films that he's done, his overall filmography, including Iron Giant as well,
fantastic movie.
He's an amazing director, and the film, though lacking on story, does make up for it in the fact that it is superbly put together.
It was very visually appealing.
Yeah. So, although I respect the fact that it has story confusion problems, I like the overall message behind the film, and I like some of the way some of the stuff was filmed.
Now that we've justified the ratings.
So I would recommend it based on those aspects.
Yeah, I'd give it a watch.
Do you know what it also comes down to, man? What simply we're not looking at here? Disney doesn't actually make very good movies. Before people get all crazy about what it is I'm saying, is that looking at the studio Disney and seeing what films they've released in the last few years, I'm not talking about the films that they help release, like the Pixar films. Those are Pixar films made in a different studio, which Disney helps produce and release, but they're not Disney films. So Cars was a Pixar film, Planes was a Disney film. I just want to throw out that little distinction there. And looking, you can go on IMDb and play with the advanced search settings, and you can see exactly what films Disney has released. Sorcerer's Apprentice, I Am Number 4, Into the Woods, The Fifth Estate, Oz the Great and Powerful, Muppets Most Wanted, Alice in Wonderland, Lone Ranger, Tomorrowland, Need for Speed, Prince of Persia. This is not an impressive list of movies.
When it comes down to it, Disney is known for its animated films, as opposed to its live action films.
But even then, that's only as of late. That's only since Princess and the Frog and the studio had changed.
Now look at that impressive resume by Disney. All their live action films that they released, okay? And yeah, I can agree with you. Most of those films are not very good. They're quite awful, actually. And now Disney's decided to take its animation department and remake all its old cartoons, all its old animated features, into live-action movies.
I hear Cinderella was good, and the trailer for Jungle Book looks awesome.
Granted, I still haven't seen Cinderella, and I would like to see the Jungle Book from first impressions of the trailer. But with Disney's track record, really, can they be that good? So you know what? I'm gonna watch Cinderella.
All right.
I'm going to watch Cinderella. I'm gonna break every stigma I have against stuff like this.
Did you see Maleficent?
No.
Did you see Alice in Wonderland?
Yes.
Did you see Oz the Great and Powerful?
Yes.
Oz the Great and Powerful was awful.
It was awful. It was trying to do a remake of The Wizard of Oz without actually having to do a remake of it. So they decided to do a prequel instead.
Which was basically a remake. And it was horrible. Alice in Wonderland follows the exact same thing that we were talking about, which you see present throughout a lot of modern day films. The Messiah, Jesus, chosen, selected, special one.
It's always the chosen one. It's always the chosen one.
Yeah, in Alice in Wonderland, it was more of the same kind of thing. I would recommend sitting down and watching Maleficent, watching it with some kids. It's a very girl-oriented film, but it is well done. I didn't like it because I'm definitely not its target audience. And I don't know whether or not I would like Cinderella, but I also want to see it because it did look good. But yeah, going through looking at Disney films, quick side note, I recently watched Monsters University.
Pixar?
Based on that first Pixar conversation. It was so unnecessary, but if that was the first film, which is a prequel to the original film, you sit down with somebody who's never seen Monsters, Inc. before, and you show them Monsters University, and then show them Monsters, Inc. Monsters, Inc. is a fantastic sequel to Monsters University. Having seen Monsters University, and then watching Monsters, Inc., and then going back and watching Monsters University, it's so boring and unnecessary and pointless and childish and not interested and no flavor to it whatsoever, that I wouldn't recommend it whatsoever. But I think to a child coming into it from first glance, yeah, Monsters University, then Monsters Inc. could work.
Well, that's interesting about Pixar because some of their earlier stuff was both child and adult oriented, and in later years it's become like a lot of it's become more child based and not like adult friendly.
I wonder how much Disney is poking its fingers into things.
Well, I recently saw Inside Out, and it can't be that bad.
Fair enough.
Because Inside Out was probably one of Pixar's best films in the last little while.
Did you see Partysaurus Rex?
I want to throw a bathtub rave. After I saw that, I'm like, how can I pull this off? Oh, I thought it was funny. It was adorable. I love the Toy Story shorts.
And it was 5 minutes long.
It was only 5 minutes long, but I liked that. I liked that they singled out Rex, and then Rex went to play it like exiled to the bathtub, and then became like the party master. Like at the end of the movie where he's like like the end of the short where he's standing up on the thing and the guys from the pool are like, come on down here, we need your help, and then he starts throwing a pool rave.
Yeah, I have a few of my I'm still trying to catch up on all my Pixar films. There's still a few more I have to tick off. Most of them are the shorts from Toy Story, which for the most part, when it comes to things like this, when it comes to, for example, the Madagascar shorts or things like that, where there's some kind of not officially the movie, but something cash grab related to, usually they're quite poor quality and usually not very interesting. All the Cars shorts are terrible, for example. But from what I hear, the Toy Story ones, some of them are 30 minutes, some of them are 25 minutes. They're with the original cast. The animation is of full quality. It's sad that they haven't been collected into a single volume so people can watch it as an addition to the 3 films and that these things are not as much watched. But from what I've been able to understand of the Toy Story shorts, and there's quite a few of them, is that they're of the same quality. They're full Pixar but short films.
It's like watching a subsection of a Toy Story movie.
Yeah.
I'm glad you suggested I watch that. I watched it twice.
Yeah. I've actually watched it twice myself. Yeah, Toy Story Toons Hawaiian Vacation, Small Fry, Toy Story of Terror, Toy Story That Time Forgot.
That's the newest one, isn't it?
Yeah, those are TV shorts. Those are the 4 Toy Story films that I haven't seen.
And one thing I'd like to speaking of Pixar is that Pixar is although owned by Disney, they do their own thing.
Yes.
And I really would like people to understand.
Okay.
Disney makes its animated films. Pixar makes its animated films. To be honest with you, Pixar's animated films are still better than Disney animated films.
Yeah, Pixar it's not hit or miss. Is it amazing or is it good? Even like as much as Cars 2, I wasn't such a big fan, or Monsters Inc. I wasn't such a big fan. When it comes to, is the animation amazing? Of course it is. Are these great kids movies? Of course they are. But you have the balance between good Pixar films and amazing Pixar films. Whereas with Disney, it's very hit or miss.
The most recent Pixar film, Inside Out, blows anything that Disney's ever done out of the water. There's so much to be said about Inside Out.
Yeah, its current score is 8.5 with 129,000 votes. It's been out now for 4 months almost. So it's a pretty high score. So I think there's not very much question of whether or not the quality of Inside Out, just based on the fact that it's been out for as long as it has. The one last thing I wanted to say about Pixar, I recommend the short Presto if you haven't seen it.
It's the one about the magician and the bunny that keeps messing him up.
Yeah, have you seen it?
Oh yeah.
It's amazing.
It is.
Absolutely amazing. It's one of the funniest things and very reminiscent of Bugs Bunny, but it's so incredibly well done. So let's wrap this thing up.
Oh, well, there you go, folks. There's podcast number 3.
If you like what you hear and you have some comments, please send us some comments. Tell your friends of what it is we're doing and try to help us promote this thing.
In fact, I demand more comments, especially on the YouTube. We're on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please comment. We want to start hearing from you guys.
Yeah, what movie should we be talking about?
We've got listeners. We need to hear from you.
We have Justin doing spoiler alert. He's out there trying to watch new films and give all he thinks about them. So please watch his stuff. We have Vivian doing soundtrack reviews, and we have her connected channel with Cinetrax, so all the things that she talks about are connected straight in, so you can come in and listen to them. I'm writing movie reviews, so if you guys want to have me write a movie review, tell me what movie. I've gotten a few requests, so I'm slowly working towards those.
I structure podcasts, so if there's something you want to hear on the podcast, let me know.
And what else are we missing?
We love you. All of you.